Time to assemble 8 frames. It should go pretty easy with the pocket screws. Hey, one of the things I like to point out when using pocket screws is to always make sure you've got them going in the right direction. I've talked about this in my pocket holes basics video, but the idea here is that you don't want the pocket screws, say, going this way on the inside of this frame, because they would be going this direction into this board, and you can see that it would just be grabbing a hold of just a tiny part of it, and this would just break away really easily. So you always want your pocket screws driving in the direction of kind of the beefier part of your board, so there's a lot to grab hold of over here, and this will make a really strong connection. And before you drive any pocket screws, you have to have the pieces clamped together, otherwise they'll slip out of alignment. So in this case, I can just do both sides at once. I'll just square that up and then square this side up. And I've set my chuck here down to, I'm like at a 4 or 5, and that just means that it's not gonna overdrive the screw. It stops when it gets to a certain torque, I guess. And knowing how those screws are gonna be oriented will help you decide if you wanna even use pocket screws at all. In general, I only use them if they're gonna be hidden. So in this case, the sides of these panels are gonna go this way, and there's gonna be a post over here, so you're not gonna see those. There's very rarely an instance where it's gonna be in a visible spot where I need to plug those and cover them up. But if the project is gonna call for a lot of visible pocket screws, I will almost always just choose a different way of making those joints. Something like this, it would be really easy for me to just make some rabbet joints and glue this all together. But I didn't really wanna go to that trouble for this. It just seems like a much simpler way to use these pocket screws that aren't gonna show anyway. It's also worth taking into consideration how long you want your project to be around. I think most woodworkers approach every project with the idea that, you know, they're building it to last forever. And that isn't always the case. I would expect to get 4 or 5 years of use out of these planter boxes, probably not much more than that. You know, if it was something where I wanted this to be an heirloom project and last for 100 years, I would be using totally different construction methods, different materials, and a totally different mindset. I don't know, it's just something to keep in mind, because I know there's gonna be people who are gonna say, well, these screws aren't gonna last forever because of the moisture damage to them, and no, they won't, but they sure will last a few years at least. I remember I did a test on my channel a while back. This is probably close to 10 years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, where I made a planter box and didn't apply any sort of paint or finish on it at all. Left it out in the elements and used it just to kind of see how long it would last, a completely untreated planter box. And that thing lasted until, I think it was last year, I finally got rid of it. And the only reason I got rid of it is not because the structure itself was falling apart, but the thin slats I used on the side were rotting away. And that was also because that whole thing was filled with dirt. In this case, I'm only gonna have a little bit of it filled with dirt. I'm peeling this dried glue off of this cheap plastic palette knife that I've been using for a couple of years now. This is a lot of layers of glue. For some reason, I always find peeling glue off of something really satisfying. Look at that. Good as new. All right, back to work. Now I can cut all these panel cleats to size. There's gonna be 2 different sizes, 8 for each size for each box. These are the cleats that I'm going to attach the metal panels to. These shorter pieces are the ones that are going to attach to the rails. I'll do those first, and then once those are attached, I can cut out the cleats that are going to go onto the stiles. These pieces are going to sit in here offset so that there's a bigger gap at the front of the planter than in the back, and so I cut out this spacer that I can use to line all of these up. And I'm going to attach these with a little bit of glue and some brad nails. Now I can cut those longer cleats down to size. And they should fit together, something kind of like that. Now I need to cut out those posts. I think it's going to be a lot easier to cross-cut these posts to their lengths first before I rip them on my table saw. Oh wow, that took a lot of effort to cut through all of those. So there's a lot going on here. I was getting really dusty, sawdust just going everywhere, which it usually doesn't do. So I looked inside of here, and let me brighten this up a little bit. That's just totally clogged up in there, so I need to clean that out. Of course that will help a lot. But the other thing is that this is the blade I was using here, and it is, I'm pretty sure it's about spent. It was just taking forever to try to cut through those boards, and it kept tripping the breaker on the saw as I would get, like, you know, halfway through. So like each board I would have to reset the breaker on the saw like every like 3 on each board, and that's just a switch down here that I've got to switch, and that means removing it and then starting over to cut it. So I think a lot of that has to do with just this really dull blade. I'm really bad about using blades, probably way beyond their usefulness. So I have this one. I think it feels a little sharper, so I'm going to put it on, clean that out, see if I have a little bit better luck, because that's going to be a whole lot of more cuts I've got to do on these. That's just one side on each of these, and each of those boards took me probably 3-4 minutes to cut through. Okay, so I got through all those a little bit easier that time. I think I only tripped that breaker maybe 5 times for all these boards, which isn't too bad. It's a lot of material to cut through, and this isn't, you know, that powerful of a saw. I think I can just get through these if I just take my time and keep flipping that switch. I've got 2 more sides on each to do just to square these up to, I want them to be 2.5 by 2.5. Well, those last two cuts went a little bit easier because there wasn't as much material to go through, but eventually I got them all squared up. Woodworking is always filled with surprises. I didn't realize those would take me so long to cut those out, but I think there was a few things working against me there. As a result, I didn't get quite as far as I was anticipating today, but again, it doesn't really matter. I think if anything, this just shows that, you know, woodworking is something that you just have to take at its own speed. And of course, enjoy the process. Well, tomorrow should be an easier day where all I gotta do is attach these posts the other way around and then cut out that steel and attach it. And oh yeah, I gotta put that little platform in there. Should be able to do that all tomorrow, I think. I'll see you then.